I think it's given. Okay, here we go. All right, we are live. We are doing the Baylor versus West Virginia preview. I want to try to get them knocked out as early in the week as possible, so people have a few days to watch this before the actual game. And the game is going to be Thursday night, so this to me is a perfect night to go ahead and do this. I want to bring on uh, a special guest here. So, for those of you who are familiar, this is the logo for Raspy Voice Kids, and I've got one of the co-owners of Raspy Voice Kids here to talk about Baylor with us. Not just Baylor, but the Baylor versus West Virginia preview. Brandon, tell them who you are, buddy.
My name is Brandon Phoenix, a.k.a. I also hate Pitt, because if you don't know anything else about me, you need to know that I also hate Pitt. I'm a huge Mountaineer fan. I'm a big fan of the Raspy Voice Kids because, of course, that's what I do. That's who I am. And I'm obviously a fan of the Big 12, being part of Big 12 Nation now for the last decade or so.
I seem to notice here in your title that you don't have Pitt capitalized.
We never capitalize Pitt. They do not deserve to be a proper noun, so I never give them the credit that so many other people do unnecessarily.
Do you feel as if that's a crime against humanity?
I do. I feel like it's a crime. It should be penalized. It's not being penalized enough. So I'm trying to make it known. I'm trying to make it known, Marshall.
Okay. Hey, you're just doing your part. You're making the world a better place. I can tell.
That's all I'm doing. Just little by little.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and jump into this. I know you have a limited amount of time tonight to do this, but thank you so much for jumping on here and helping grow a little content here and everything. So as I said, let's just jump right on into it. I want to ask you a couple of questions. I'll ask you one on offense and one on defense. So for offense, I would like to know somebody that you're excited about that maybe the rest of us don't know yet. Who's somebody on offense that excites you?
Well, everybody talks about JT Daniels. He's our starting quarterback, former 5-star transfer from USC by way of Georgia. Everybody talks about him, and he's rightfully so. He's an excellent quarterback. Bryce Ford-Wheaton leads the nation in contested catches, or had up until Saturday. Really a stud, so a lot of people talk about him. But the guy that you got to watch out for, the up-and-coming receiver, sophomore, Caden Prather. Caden Prather is a beast, a big-time, big-bodied wide receiver who can move. He's a guy who's on the come-up. And if you're Baylor and any other opponent in the Big 12, you need to watch for Caden Prather.
Awesome. So I remember specifically a couple of years ago, I know he was a freshman, so I think I'm right about 2 years ago, I asked you about, hey, who's somebody that I need to know about? And you told me Sam James. And I watched him. I was like, wow, he really is good. I wish Baylor had that guy. Okay, so let's jump over to your defense. Who's somebody that we need to know about that isn't a big name yet?
Well, again, everybody talks about Dante Stills, and once again, rightfully so, preseason first team all Big 12. The man is a stud, has a chance to be an All-American if they would quit double teaming and holding him. But the guy that you're going to see a lot because of the position he plays at linebacker is Lee Koba. Lee Koba, first of all, his name is spelled Kpogba. It's weird the way it's pronounced, but he is a stud. Not a gigantic man, but he's all muscle, and he's all mean all the time. He can move, he can go, he will get it. Lee Koba, number 8, a guy to watch out for, again, if you're Baylor or any other Big 12 opponent against the Mountaineers this year. Watch out for Lee Koba. Doing his thing. We really like him in Morgantown.
Okay, so at the very end of this video, I forgot to mention that we'll get into predictions, how you think the game is going to play out and everything. As I promised, we'll kind of keep this one a little bit short and simple tonight. So I talked about West Virginia, and you've given me a couple of names to watch out for. Now I would like to segue into both of our feelings on the state of the Big 12 right now. So if you want to argue with me on my rankings here, I'll just give you my rankings real quick where I have the Big 12 after last night's games. So
yeah, give me your rankings. I'd like to hear them.
Okay. Well, you think you want to hear them. We'll see here in a second. Okay, so Oklahoma State, I've got them at the top for now. I moved Texas up to number 2 now. I have TCU at number 3. I still have Baylor at number 4. I've got Kansas State at 5. I've got Kansas at 6. Texas Tech at 7. Iowa State at 8. I've got West Virginia at 9 and Oklahoma at the bottom. Would you change those?
Well, I'd change one.
Huh?
Change one team.
You would change one team?
would be the worst team in the Big 12 right now for me.
Even after what Oklahoma's going through right now?
Yeah, I would change one team. I would change Oklahoma and West Virginia. I still think that I'm not sure that West Virginia has proven Big 12 they beat Oklahoma that they'll beat Oklahoma. Beat them.
Okay.
I'm not going to say we're better than them. I think this year could be the year. I hope this year is the year, but I'm not going to say it until it's done. I got to flip flop them.
All right. Well, I mean, you're giving some honest answers. You have no homer in you, huh?
No, I try not to. I really try to be honest about what I'm seeing. Now, what I will tell you is West Virginia has talent. The
Yes.
talent is there. There's no question. There's talent. There's more talent on this team than there was 4 years ago when Neil Brown got here. The problem is in the details. They're timely or untimely penalties, drops, lots of drops from the receivers, and just mistakes, miscues. And they always seem to come at the most inopportune times. They did last year against Oklahoma, 16-13. Game that Oklahoma didn't lead until they won the game, essentially. So I'm not down on the players, and I know the season is long and it's not over. There's still room to grow. But in this moment, I don't believe in the Mountaineers until they prove me wrong. This week, they have a chance to prove me wrong. They're only 3-point dogs at home to Baylor, which surprised me, to be honest. And I know we're going to get into predictions later, so I won't give you a prediction yet. But only being a 3-point dog tells me Vegas sees something that I haven't seen yet. And it might be that what you have, Texas being your number 2 team, is significantly better with Quinn Ewers, significantly better than we thought initially when West Virginia played them. The difference I'll say is that people will say West Virginia only lost 38-20 to Texas. And I'll tell you, that game was never as close as 18 points. It was never that close.
Yeah.
From kickoff. It was 28-0 at the end of the first quarter. That game was never an 18-point game. Texas took their foot off the gas. West Virginia was never prepared to play, and they definitely didn't have a chance once C.J. Donaldson, our best running back, was out of the game after that very scary incident. So I don't have any homer in me. I call it like I see it, and right now I would put West Virginia at the bottom with a chance to climb, because that's Neil Brown's claim to fame, right? Trust to climb. So we'll wait and see what he does.
Okay, so are you not buying into what I hear a lot, fire Neil Brown?
Oh no, I'm buying into it. I'm on. I was done with Neil Brown. After the Pitt game, from the standpoint of I just don't think he's the guy. I think he's a nice guy. I think he's a good guy. I like the way he represents our program, which is a very important part of being the head coach at any football program in FBS. It is not the most important part. The most important part is winning football games. He's not doing it. He's simply not doing it. In 4 years, he's only beaten 4 teams that have finished the season with winning records at the FBS level. That's not going to cut it anywhere that matters. Where in the Power 5 will that cut it? Neil Brown is not doing the job that we're paying him significantly money to do. So I'm definitely in the fire Neil Brown camp. Now, I'm realistic. I understand how this works. His buyout's $20 million. It gets cheaper every day, but it only gets cheaper because we pay him. That money is essentially guaranteed to him. So I know we're not firing him. It looks like, by all accounts, Neil Brown's going to be here through next season. That's the 2023 season. I just hope the program's not tanked too far by that point. But if it was up to me and I could wave a magic wand, he'd be gone.
Fair enough, man. I appreciate your honesty. I really do. It's very refreshing to not just hear homer all the time. You know what I mean? And I absolutely try to be the same way with my Bears, because this page on Facebook, my Twitter, this YouTube channel, I'm sort of representative of the entire Big 12. So I want to give people something to listen to, not just Baylor love, if that makes sense, Okay, so the last point on the Big 12, would you say that it's a pretty strong conference from top to bottom, minus maybe Oklahoma? I think people rag on y'all a little too much. I still think y'all have good talent. I think y'all are a good team, but this is a tough conference this year. It really is.
It's a tough conference from top to bottom. There are no easy outs, like you said, save for maybe Oklahoma. I'm curious to see what happens with Oklahoma after that shellacking. What do they do? Do they rebound? Who is Brent Venables? Now, I said before the season I didn't believe in 2 people. That was Brent Venables and Dylan Gabriel. I didn't believe in them. And Dylan Gabriel proved to me in that Kansas State game or the TCU game he's not the guy. And the concussion surely does not help. And I hope he gets better, and I hope he's okay. But Brent Venables, one of the things I learned years ago was when a guy's an assistant coach for years, for decades, there's usually a reason he's been an assistant coach and not a head coach for decades. I look back at a guy like Bud Foster at Virginia Tech. He brought that lunch pail, and he was a great defensive coordinator for Virginia Tech. He was there with Frank Beamer for so many of those very important Virginia Tech Hokie football teams, but he was never the man. He was never the guy. And there was a reason he wasn't the guy. And I feel like Brent Venables might be in that same kind of situation. Great rah-rah, great passion, great defensive coordinator, maybe not the head guy. We'll see, though. He'll have a chance to prove it because after getting embarrassed to the tune of 49-0, the worst defeat in Oklahoma since 1998, if he doesn't bounce back in a big way, it might be curtains for him sooner rather than later. And no pun intended, but we'll see. We'll see.
So let me throw this at you.
Let me just say, but what I mean is, Big 12 doesn't have the highs of the SEC or the Big 10. It doesn't have the lows of the ACC or the Pac-12. It's got meat through it.
Yes. Okay. So since you brought up Oklahoma, let me throw this at you. I don't think he's really going to have the opportunity to prove himself this year. I think next year is when he has to prove himself. And I say that for this. They lost 49 players from their offseason. All these transfers that Lincoln Riley stole and took to USC, and some went to, South Carolina, other places. 49 players gone. They did a good job of bringing in some high recruits to replace some of the high recruits that left. Some people went to the NFL, some people graduated. But think about all that turnover. How is that team supposed to gel? How are we supposed to expect them to be as formidable as they have been over the years under these circumstances? The last point I want to make about Oklahoma is, if you brought in Nick Saban, would you expect them to dominate the Big 12? I wouldn't, not under these circumstances.
No, I totally agree. It's the same kind of conversation we were having about Morgantown. A lot of people expected Neil Brown and West Virginia to be good on defense because Jordan Leslie and Neil Brown said they were going to be good on defense. And I said, you lost too many players. How can you be good on defense? You lost too much in the secondary. How can you be good in the secondary? It's the same kind of problem. People want to talk X's and O's, and those things matter, but nothing matters more than the Jimmies and the Joes. If you don't have the guys, you don't have the guys. You don't have the horses, you don't have the horses. You can't run with the big dogs if you don't have any big dogs, and that's the problem Oklahoma has. That's the problem the Mountaineers have. The rest of the Big 12 seems like they don't have those same kind of problems.
Man, I like that X's and O's and Jimmys and Joes. I might have to steal that from you.
Hey, man, I stole it from somebody. You go ahead and steal it.
All right, buddy. Okay, so let's end our talk on the Big 12. Great points that you have. I totally agree with everything you said, really. We can go ahead and kind of finish this up if you have a couple of questions about my thoughts on Baylor.
Yeah, I want to know, I'm a big fan of Dave Aranda. When people start talking about Neil Brown and they say Neil Brown needs more time to rebuild, I say, well, Dave Aranda won the Big 12 in his second year at the helm, right? What does Dave Aranda do so well as a head coach?
Okay, man. He is an absolutely different animal. If you ever heard him speak, it just won't make any sense to you. Well, I mean, maybe you. To me, I literally have to rewatch what he says like 3 or 4 times to kind of figure out what he was trying to say. Okay, so he's different from a philosophical standpoint, but the difference is those kids love him. They absolutely buy into what he's saying. Can you still hear me? Okay. So they buy into what he's saying, and if you remember a couple of games, like one where he won and he's walking to the middle of the field to shake hands with the coach and say whatever, and the players come up behind him and dump a Gatorade bottle over him. If you remember that reaction, he walked through like nothing, like it didn't even happen to him. He is that hyper-focused, and that's what he teaches to all of his players. If you watch a Baylor game, you will not see players beating their chest all game long and throwing their hands up. They're focused on the next play. A perfect example is Iowa State. When we played them earlier this year, there was a questionable targeting call that got one of their star secondary safeties kicked out of the game, and another questionable call. Well, Matt Campbell called a timeout and reamed the referees and went off about it. So maybe that inspired his players. Well, I'm telling you this. If that happened to Baylor, Dave Aranda wouldn't say a word to the refs. He would sit there and calmly go to his coaches and say, okay, this is what we're going to do on the next play. He is that hyper-focused. His mantra is focus on the focus. I love that saying, but that's what he teaches to his players. In my opinion, Baylor will very rarely ever be outcoached. So he's starting to bring along a little bit of talent too, because he's got a reputation of doing so at LSU. So we're starting to get some star players from LSU and some star recruits. So I think it's only going to increase. That's the best way I can kind of explain the magic of a Dave Aranda and why, we're going to cry so hard if he ever leaves.
Understood. And next thing, who's the guy that you love that maybe not everybody appreciates for the Baylor Bears on offense?
That is such an easy question. And I've already been kind of touting this guy. Richard Reese. He's a true freshman. Okay, so you've always heard the cliche of the Thunder and Lightning combo as running backs. So we have our Thunder guy. It's Tay McWilliams, but he's injured. He's injured right now. The Lightning aspect of that would be Squirrel Williams because he's a junior, fifth-year junior or something like that. So he's given that starting spot. He's very electric and dynamic, especially around the end. He's a very fast dude. But his backup is Richard Reese, leading the team in rushing, and he's much more dynamic. He is amazing to me as a true freshman. And we're talking about a guy who's 175 pounds, so a smaller running back. And I watched him, and I forget the opponent now. I want to say Iowa State. So for a 175-pound running back, I literally watched him run around the edge with his speed, and then he got caught up by like 4 different guys with good tackling angles. And he bounced off of them and still made it into the end zone, like a 20-something yard play. He got to about the 10-yard line and just bounced off of one dude, bounced off another dude, bounced off another dude, bounced off another dude, and made it to the end zone anyway. I've never seen that. Who does that as a small running back? Are we talking Deuce Vaughn? Not Barry Sanders, but that was amazing to me. Y'all will know his name before his career is over. If Baylor was winning a little bit more, and if he had a couple more, not couple, but 50 more yards per game, I literally would be sitting here saying we have a Heisman candidate as a true freshman. We're not there yet. Before he's done, if he stays healthy, I could see another Heisman coming to Baylor. Richard Reese is the real deal. I promise you'll know his name eventually.
Did he get an NIL deal with Reese's?
I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to do a little hype video and hype him up and be Richard Reese. He's Reese's Pieces. He melts in your mouth and burns your ass.
Good. Now on defense, who's the guy that nobody talks about that you like?
Who is nobody talking about? I don't hear nationally people talking about Dylan Doyle, but he's well known here. We think he's an All-America candidate. We have some stars in the linebacker core because we've got a 4 or 5 star recruit in Josh White that came from LSU. He can't even make it on the field. I'm pretty impressed with that because the people above him are playing out of their minds. You might remember Al Walcott in the secondary. He's probably our last big name that stayed with us. Christian Morgan has looked good, but he's been injured. On the defensive line, we have a lot of stars there. So I think it's basically going to be people you already know. Siaka Ika is kind of a beast, a Samoan beast. He's one of those Samoan guys that are just way too big. Doesn't look like he's ever lifted a weight in his life, but he's big and huge, and he clogs that middle pretty well. To think of a person that's not well known yet, that's a little difficult for me because I feel like our stars are established, and I think most people know their names. I think I have a good example. Gabe Hall. I don't think a lot of people know him, but I mentioned Siaka Ika. He's was projected as a first-round draft pick, and now I'm hearing that Gabe Hall actually projects in front of him. So literally, we might maybe have 2 first-round picks just from our defensive line, and supposedly the better player is Gabe Hall. I don't think a lot of people know him yet because he's not as flashy as a Siaka Ika. Siaka Ika is kind of like a cultural icon around these parts, you know.
Yeah, no, that's impressive. That's impressive. I'm glad you guys got him. It's good for the Big 12.
Yeah. So my last thoughts on Baylor, if people want to call it a struggle, but, you know, our only 2 losses were to ranked teams. I feel like maybe our 2 toughest games are already out of the way. I think things should get easier. Now, my concerns coming into the season, at the beginning of the season, after watching the games, was, man, we were letting a lot of scrambling running backs run around, and I was expecting the same dominance from the defensive line that we had at the end of last year. When we got to Oklahoma, we killed their quarterbacks. When we got to Oklahoma State, we forced 7 interceptions and against Baylor in 2 games. He only threw 11 all year, and then another one in the bowl game. So he threw 12 all year, and 7 of those were against Baylor. That's pretty impressive. That was our defensive line just taking over, and he has to chuck it, you know. Now, the other concern was we have brand new wide receivers, all of them. I might be wrong, but I think we had 7 career catches coming into the season with a brand new starting quarterback, Blake Shapen, because we let Gary Bohannon go because we thought Blake Shapen was a better quarterback. But they did not gel together. And then our star wide receiver, Monterey Baldwin, got hurt, and that really made it tough on us. We didn't have a go-to guy, so to speak. But that said, I'm starting to see our defensive line take over a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. I think that's a scary aspect for our opponents. And I'm definitely starting to see our receivers gel with Blake Shapen. That's definitely going to be really rough. If we establish that ground game, we're going to be a very tough out in the future. I hope, and I kind of think that's where we're headed.
Yeah, well, that's scary for West Virginia because the problem we have is our secondary. Our secondary is just absolutely terrible. Our best defensive back, Charles Woods, has been out with a high ankle sprain that he had surgically repaired. And if you can throw the ball, West Virginia is just in trouble all day long. Our pass rush is okay. It's not terrible. It's pretty good, actually. But it's not good enough to overcome what that secondary just doesn't have, and that's talent. So you guys are gelling at the right time, the wrong time for us. The bye week helps. We're searching for guys in that secondary. I think we're going to see a lot of young guys playing, but we have a lot of high hopes.
Yeah, I mean, so as far as the bye week, you know, that's going to kind of sort of cancel each other out because we just came off a bye too. So there's no real advantage to either team, I wouldn't think.
Not an advantage like against you necessarily, but it's an advantage for us to be able to work some guys into a scheme that maybe they weren't prepared for before. We had a lot of transfers in that secondary, so every week is just a benefit for us to get better.
That's a good point. Okay, so we can get into the predictions. I'm going to ask you this. Are you going to hang your hat on the fact that Baylor has never defeated West Virginia in West Virginia?
No. Nope. I see trends get broken all the time. West Virginia was 4-2 going into Texas. They were 4-2. Now we're 4-3, you know, and that was obliterated. So, which I will say that we're still the only team that Texas does not have a winning record against in the Big 12. We're tied now, so that's good for me. But I don't see us winning this game. I don't see how we do it. I don't think this team is good enough to beat Baylor. Baylor's not a juggernaut. They're not as good as I thought they were going to be. For the reasons you mentioned. I thought their offense would be much better. But I just don't see West Virginia being able to hold them down. I was surprised, once again, that the line is only 3. I don't know if that has to do with it being a night game. I don't know if that has to do with West Virginia. I don't know. I don't know what it has to do with. But I think that Baylor covers, actually. I think Baylor wins the game 34-21.
Okay. So, Matt, you know, I can't guarantee a Baylor victory, but I do feel pretty confident. I think y'all are still trying to get your legs underneath you, such as you said, that you're replacing a lot of defensive starters. Y'all have some struggles. I do not think y'all are a bad team. I've been defending y'all pretty much all year because I've heard y'all started off 0-2 and people wanted to trash y'all. I'm like, well, look at those opponents, you know. Yes, it looks bad when you lose to Kansas, but does it look bad now that we know Kansas is actually probably a pretty decent team? So I give y'all credit for that. And literally, it might have been a 13-point deficit, but it was one play. It was just one pick six that made it a 13-point
in overtime.
Victory. Exactly. Yeah. So That one particular. Well, I was just going to say that one particular play. Yeah, you could put that on JT Daniels. That was one bad pass, but you took Kansas to overtime. So I was impressed by that because we know Kansas is really not a pushover.
My thing is you have to look deeper at that game. So in that game, you get a personal foul roughing the passer at a very inopportune time, which instead of forcing Kansas to kick a field goal, allows them to go down and score a touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
Changes the game. Those are the kinds of things. Against Pitt, we're going down to take the lead, win the game. JT Daniels hits Bryce Ford Wheaton, our best receiver in the hands, bounces off his hands into Pitt defender's hands for a pick six touchdown. Those are the kinds of things that happen under Neil Brown's in his tenure. So far, those kinds of plays are the plays that happen repeatedly. Always do.
Yep.
Can't account for that. I don't know how you account for those things, but they happen repeatedly. It's become a pattern, and that's why I don't give us credit of saying we're not a bad team. We're not a bad team talent-wise, but we're a bad team because we just can't get out of our own way.
Okay, I mean that's fair enough. You're obviously a very honest West Virginia fan.
Yeah, so I don't see us making enough plays to beat Baylor, but. If we did beat Baylor, I wouldn't be shocked to my core.
It's same here. I could definitely see us losing because I think it's going to be a very tough conference year this year for everybody, and maybe that's why there's only a 3-point margin there. Perhaps Vegas doesn't have as much love and confidence in Baylor's offense yet, but even in our loss to Oklahoma State last week, Blake Shapen started to show out. He started to show why we let Gary Bohannon go. He threw for 345 yards and had a couple of garbage interceptions at the end trying to catch up. Well, like one of them, I think, was just a drop pass like you had talked about with y'all's game. One of that, wasn't really on Blake Shapen. And then the other one, he just had no choice. We were down like 11 points with not enough time left. And he chunks the ball to the one guy who was kind of open, but the safety knew what was happening. So he had the option to, okay, if he tries to throw it over, I got time to run back there. If he throws it sharp, I got time to go to it. And he did. He was just waiting on it. But what else could he do? He's trying to win the game, He's starting to show out. So other than that one play that he kind of didn't have much of a choice of, I think he's going to start gelling with those wide receivers. I'm already seeing that. Monterey Baldwin went off and got us back into that game. 2 incredible touchdown catches. Blake Shapen is a little like Charlie Brewer, if you remember him, but with a much stronger arm. He's a gamer, but he's got a stronger arm. He's very calm, cool, and collected. He looks like Dave Aranda's son. He's just so calm. If you ever watch him after a play, he'll throw the ball and then just walk around like he's looking at the menu at Taco Bell or something. So in the moment.
Yeah, listen, man, I picked West Virginia to lose, but I'll be rooting my heart out. I'll be up, walking back and forth, pacing the floor like I always do, begging and pleading that they win that game because, I want West Virginia to win every chance they get. And I that's all I'll be doing is begging and pleading, chanting and doing my thing, wishing for the Mountaineers, rooting them on.
Well, of course, that's obvious there. Are you not going to the game?
No, I can't make it. I work Thursday, so I can't make it up to Morgantown.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I just realized that I didn't even give a score prediction. I'd say with your defense not being up to par of what y'all need to be at, what y'all expect to be, what y'all want to be yet, I think Baylor has the ability to put up some points. I don't know if Tay McWilliams is coming back. That'll make a big difference because we're kind of relying on just speedy running backs that kind of always go to the outside. If we can get back to that inside and make it unpredictable for y'all, with Blake Shapen finally kind of opening up to the receivers, we got a great tight end, Ben Sims, who I'm pretty sure will make it to the NFL. He's a very reliable guy. Then we got a backup, Drake Dabney, who has now learned how to hurdle defenders. He's amazing to watch as well. I think there's just too much there on offense, and our defense, I think, is starting to improve. I am predicting a Baylor victory. If I have to go with the score, I want to make the score a little bit high because I I'm starting to trust Baylor's offense. And also, I don't know if I trust y'all's defense yet. So I would say I think I could see them going to 35 points, even though it's on the road. And I would probably say maybe 21 to 24 points. I'll go 35-24 Baylor.
We're pretty close in our scores. I hope we're both wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I understand you there. Man. All right, well, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap this up. We just passed the 30-minute mark, so
All right.
I promised we would try to keep this to 20, 30 minutes, and I'll respect your time and everything. Thank you so much for helping out with this. To the viewers watching, do me a favor, do this channel a favor, and hit the like and subscribe. And we will do this again next week with our next Baylor opponent and talk more of the Big 12, give you all an inside view of who to look out for in all the other teams so that you're more informed. And hopefully we've entertained you a little bit as well. The last thing I want to do to end this is say sick 'em Bears.